I wouldn't use that phrase, but I know what you mean. I would be very surprised if you made the year out. I think yesterday was a fiasco too far. And this hasn't been the main interpretation, but if you look at what happened in the Commons chamber, he lost, we've got a majority of 400. He lost that majority during the day and had to change his own amendment because Labour MPs wouldn't support him. Labour MPs preferred a committee made up of Conservatives, members of the House of Lords, as well as Labour MPs, rather than number 10 Downing Street and the Prime Minister doing what the Commons wanted, which was to get to the bottom of what happened during the appointment of Peter Mandelson and get all the documentation out. He couldn't carry that through.
All right, buckle up, because British politics has just done that thing where it trips over its own shoelaces, spills hot tea everywhere, and then insists everything is absolutely fine. Welcome back to Brit Article, the channel where Westminster chaos gets unpacked, fact-checked, and lightly roasted for your viewing pleasure. Now, imagine this. You wake up, check the news, and discover that the Prime Minister is insisting he was thorough, rigorous, and forensic, yet somehow still didn't notice the sheer depth of a relationship involving Lord Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. That's not a plot twist. That's the headline. And suddenly, voters aren't just asking questions, they're demanding Keir Starmer packs up the number 10 removal vans. Before we dive in, quick favor. If you enjoy sharp takes, fast pacing, and politics without the boredom tax, hit subscribe and tap the notification bell, because judging by the state of Westminster right now, we're going to be busy. So let's set the scene. Keir Starmer, lawyer, knight of the realm, professional, serious man. A prime minister who sold himself as the adult in the room, the bloke who promised competence, stability, and a government that wouldn't leave you nervously refreshing the news app every 5 minutes. And yet, here we are. Polls crashing, authority wobbling, and half the country saying, yeah, maybe not. Here's the number that should make Downing Street's coffee go cold. Half of Britons want Starmer to quit following the Lord Mandelson scandal. Not half of Twitter, not half of one angry WhatsApp group, half the country. According to YouGov, just 24% of voters want him to stay as both Labour leader and Prime Minister. 24. That's not a mandate, that's a clearance sale. Now, transition with me for a second, because this isn't just about one appointment. This is about trust. And trust in politics is like fine china. Once you drop it, you can glue it back together, but everyone can still see the cracks. Labour voters themselves are split right down the middle, 40% backing Starmer, 37% saying they want new leadership. That's not unity. That's a party awkwardly arguing at the dinner table while pretending everything's fine because guests are over. And it gets worse for Keir. Overwhelming majorities of 2024 Tory voters and Reform UK voters want him gone. Now, sure, opposition voters calling for the PM to resign isn't exactly shocking, but the scale matters. This isn't background noise. This is a political fire alarm going off at full volume. Now, let's rewind to the moment the wheels really came off. February 5th. YouGov polls 6,741 Britons just hours after Keir Starmer admits that number 10 knew Lord Mandelson had visited Jeffrey Epstein's house before appointing him as the UK's ambassador to the United States. Read that again slowly. Knew about the visit, appointed him anyway, and then acted surprised when voters reacted like someone had just microwaved fish in the office kitchen. Cue Prime Minister's questions. Enter Kemi Badenoch, armed with receipts and zero patience. And suddenly, Starmer is explaining at speed that yes, there was due diligence, yes, there was security vetting, yes, everything was handled properly. Except it wasn't. Starmer told the House that what wasn't known was the depth, the sheer depth and extent of Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. Apparently, Mandelson had lied to everyone for years. New information emerged in September, and when it did, Starmer says he sacked him. Now, here's the problem, because to the public, this explanation sounds less about accountability and more like the political version of, I trusted him, all right. And voters are done with leaders who keep trusting the wrong people and then acting shocked when it blows up. Let's pause here, because this is the pivot point of the entire scandal. Starmer is trying to frame this as betrayal. Mandelson lied, Mandelson misled, Mandelson is the villain of the piece. And sure, if those claims are accurate, that matters. But in politics, responsibility doesn't vanish just because someone else lied. The Prime Minister doesn't get to say, well, I asked nicely. And that's why this scandal has teeth, because Starmer's whole brand was judgment, careful judgment, forensic judgment, grown-up judgment. And yet, voters are now asking, if this slipped through, what else did? Now, fast forward to Hastings earlier today. Starmer steps up and delivers an apology. And to be fair, this wasn't the cold, corporate sorry we've all grown used to. He spoke directly about Epstein's victims, about trauma, about power failing them. He said he was sorry for believing Mandelson's lies and appointing him, sorry that the story is being relived publicly once again. It was human, it was emotional, and for some people, it mattered. But for others, too little, too late. And here's where the political clock becomes ruthless, because in crises like this, timing isn't just everything, it's the only thing. Veteran MP Graham Stringer didn't mince words. He went on GB News and declared Starmer finished as Prime Minister. Not struggling, not wounded, finished. Stringer didn't even limit his criticism to Mandelson. He rattled off a list: embarrassing policy documents, shaky decisions, Chagos, benefits reform, or rather the failure to reform it. The Mandelson scandal, he argued, wasn't an isolated incident, it was the final straw. And that's what should worry Labour HQ the most. When scandals stop being about one thing and start symbolizing everything, you're in real trouble. Stringer said Starmer should have acted sooner, been honest sooner, apologized sooner, promised transparency sooner, because by hesitating, Starmer gave the opposition a gift-wrapped opportunity. And Kemi Badenoch, she didn't waste it. At PMQs, she didn't just criticize, she nailed him. Because when a leader looks defensive rather than decisive, every answer feels like an admission. Now, let's zoom out, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. British voters right now are exhausted. Cost of living pressures, public services stretched thin, a political class that keeps promising stability and delivering chaos with better PR. Starmer was supposed to be the reset, the calm after the storm. Instead, voters are watching another leader insist the system worked while the outcome screams that it didn't. That's why calls for a vote of no confidence are growing louder. Badenoch is pushing, Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey is pushing, and crucially, the public mood is shifting from frustration to something more dangerous: indifference mixed with anger. Because once voters start saying they're all the same, politics stops being about persuasion and starts being about survival. Now, does this mean Starmer is definitely done? Not necessarily. Politics has a short memory, but only when leaders act fast, clearly, and convincingly. The problem is that every day this drags on, the narrative hardens, from mistake to pattern, from error to character flaw. And here's the brutal truth. Even a good apology doesn't reset the scoreboard. It just stops it getting worse. The poll numbers? They're the hangover, not the party. So what happens next? Labour MPs start glancing at one another. The loyalists tell us it'll blow over. The nervous ones check their marginal seats. The ambitious ones quietly update their contacts. And the public? They keep asking a very simple question. Is this the judgment we were promised? Because leadership isn't just about saying sorry, it's about convincing people you won't have to keep saying it. And that's where Keir Starmer now stands, on the edge of a credibility cliff, with voters watching closely to see whether he steps back or slips. If you've stuck with me this far, you already know this story isn't over. British politics rarely ends with a neat conclusion. It just lurches into the next act. Thanks for watching Brit Article. Appreciate your time as always.